Didn't Trump help start historic peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel? He's a bad guy, but that seems like a W. No, dummy. The historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia already existed in all but like legal doctrine. Okay. Donald Trump simply sidestepped the Palestinians and their understandable demands for statehood and said, fuck the Palestinians. We're just going to do this peace negotiation between states that were already at peace privately and sometimes even publicly and solidify it in paperwork. This was disastrous, absolutely disastrous. And Joseph Robinette Brandon defending that is crazy. Here's every. Okay, let's take a look at this from Breakthrough News. Here's every ceasefire deal and prisoner exchange Hamas has offered Israel since October 7th.
Ceasefire deal and prisoner exchange that Hamas has offered Israel since October 7th. October 9th. Hamas offers Israel an unspecified number of women and children being held hostage in Gaza in exchange for 36 Palestinian women and children being held hostage in Israeli prisons. October 16th. A Hamas official says they'd free all Israeli captives in Gaza in exchange for 6,000 Palestinian captives in Israel. October 17th. A Hamas official tells NBC News that they'd release all of their Israeli civilian captives if Israel agreed to stop bombing Gaza. October 28th. Hamas's leader in Gaza offers to release all of the Israeli captives in Gaza in exchange for all of the Palestinian captives in Israeli prisons. This proposal, more commonly known as All for All, was a demand widely adopted by Israelis protesting against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. November 17th.
It's like Israel's answer always is no, smile. We will continue killing you and your friends and your family and all of the other people that are in the Gaza Strip are open air prison.
Qatari negotiators propose a deal where Hamas will release 50 Israeli captives in exchange for a 3-day ceasefire. Hamas agrees to the general outline of the deal. Israel refuses. January 2nd. Hamas proposed a 3-phase deal where Hamas releases 40 Israeli captives in exchange for a gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza and the release of Palestinian captives. In the last phase, Israel would end the war and Hamas would release all of its Israeli captives. Israel rejected this offer. January 18th. Members of the Israeli government make a proposal to Benjamin Netanyahu to reopen negotiations with Hamas. He refuses. January 22nd. Israel rejects a deal where Hamas would release Israeli captives in exchange for the release of Palestinian captives, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and accepting Hamas's leadership in Gaza. February 7th. Hamas proposes a 3-phase.
I promise you he won't. Those are the words of President Biden telling.
Oh my God, I don't care.
Phased 4.5-month ceasefire, where in the first phase, Hamas would release all women, children, ill and young male Israeli captives in exchange for the release of Palestinian women and children being held captive in Israeli jails.
Notice how Hamas is calculating they're able to make bigger and bigger demands of Israel as time goes on. This is very normal. This is like literally the fucking same exact process that took place between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine had the upper hand earlier on in the Antalya, like in the Turkish deal that was being put forward, the 15-point plan. And now Russia, of course, has the upper hand. The other reason why Hamas is able to ask for more Palestinian captives is because Israel in that same time frame was literally taking more Palestinians hostage in the West Bank. So the number of Palestinian prisoners was rapidly growing.
In the second phase, adult male captives on both sides would be exchanged, and then in the third phase, remains of the dead and an end to the war. March 15th, Hamas offers to release Israeli women, children, elderly and sick captives being held in Gaza in exchange for 700 to 1,000 Palestinian captives in Israeli prisons. And most recently, yesterday, Hamas offered to participate in a proposed 3-stage deal where, in the first phase, Hamas would release Israeli female prisoners for 50 Palestinians held in Israeli prisons each. After 11 days of ceasefire, Israel would begin to dismantle its military structures in Gaza. In the second phase, there would be a halt to all military activity in Gaza. And then in the final phase...
At no point did Ukraine have the upper hand as delusional. No, Ukraine had a much better bargaining. Ukraine literally had a much better time bargaining when the conversation was taking place in Turkey. One might even say that Russia's interest in bargaining with Ukraine at the time was because they had miscalculated gravely, and Ukraine had actually created an environment where Russia did not have the permanent air superiority that they took for granted that they thought they would. There was a point in time when Russia thought that this would be a special military operation, as in, we'll just fucking blow up their air defenses and, you know, maybe even decapitate the leadership and bring in our own guys from either the Ukrainian parliament or their own guys in general. I think people forget that they literally moved all the way to Kiev only to move back east of the Dnieper River. How he even secured Crimea to this day, Crimea is an entirely different story. There's a reason why overtaking Kharkiv was deadly and destroyed many of the civilian infrastructure that existed, versus Crimea was virtually overtaken, annexed, without a single shot fired. I mean, shots were fired, but barely, in comparison to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Since then, the leverage has moved entirely in the direction of Russia, who's still not having an easy time, of course, but they have basically firmly planted their flag in existence in eastern Ukraine.
The war in Israel's blockade on Gaza would end, and the reconstruction process would begin. Israel rejected this deal. Now, you might be saying, well, what about all of Israel's proposals that
bargaining with Putin is the same as bargaining with Netanyahu or Hitler. No bargain you make will be upheld. It's ironic that you say this because you're in the fucking broadcast of a person who has been demanding that we literally bargain with, you know, your version of Hitler, Benjamin Netanyahu, from the jump. Okay, saying, well, that guy is Putler, that guy is Hitler, you can't bargain with him, is silly. That's not how the real world works. Notice how I've been demanding a ceasefire deal and a hostage swap in perpetuity, not saying that like Israel will just renege on the offer and blow up Gaza anyway. Notice how that's not the language I'm using, and that's precisely not the language I was using when dealing with Russia as well, because that's not how you do these things. All war and all conflict inevitably end in treaties, either with full and unconditional surrender or not. It's just a matter of when. That's why it is wise. Reddit Warhawks and OSINT are slowly not talking about Ukraine anymore as things get worse. They never had stakes or give a fuck about Ukrainians. Of course not. That is how every war ends. Except World War II. That is literally how World War II ended. What are you talking about? What? What do you think happened at the end of World War II? They were just like, all right, Hitler killed himself. Let's just leave this alone. Is that what you think happened? All right, good luck, guys. You did it. Yeah. Hitler rage quit. So I guess that's it. So my point is, given that all wars end with a ceasefire and a treaty, it's all a matter of when is the best, most opportune moment to strike or to facilitate said treaty. When you have the most leverage, when you have the most bargaining power. For Ukraine, the highest level of bargaining power they had was when they had seemingly thwarted Russia's attacks and also refused to let them have air superiority. That was a major miscalculation for the Russian war cabinet, for Vladimir Putin. That was the greatest opportunity they had, as I stated at the time. The idea that he was not going to follow through on the conditions of that bargain does not change the reality. The fuck are you saying? Not all wars end in a ceasefire. Some end in terms of surrender, in which the winners dictate what to do with those who lost. I think you are having a very hard time understanding the words that are coming out of my mouth, considering that you just repeated the same exact thing that I just said. Either you are so angry that you did not listen to what I was saying, or simply did not hear it, because you chose to repeat exactly what I said verbatim. I factored in your consideration into my commentary, and yet you chose to overlook it. I said, all wars end in a ceasefire and a treaty, like a functional ceasefire, as in like neither belligerent is shooting at one another. Whether there's full-blown conditional surrender or partial surrender or not, as in, yes, some wars do end in full-blown surrender. But at the end of it, you make peace, some form of managed peace with your enemies. My bad. Thought you meant there's just a cessation of violence without resolution of the conflict. No, I'm saying the opposite of what you think I'm saying. Because appeasement ended well last time is not a good argument, because obviously what I want and what the Palestinian people want And what the Palestinian representatives want is a ceasefire. Now, that doesn't mean a permanent ceasefire, as a matter of fact. Now, that doesn't mean that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to follow through on those conditions. They certainly don't seem to want to follow through on those conditions at all. And yet we are still demanding such things. Why is it that people in my chat or Palestinians, why is it the Palestinians are not saying, oh, dude, no ceasefire, fuck them all. Let's keep the war going. Chat. Well, I guess some people are doing that. Hammer and Sickle Twitter Twitter users, Twitter power users with Hammer and Sickle are saying like, no ceasefire, but very marginal voices overall. The overwhelming majority of those who are on the pro-Palestinian camp want a permanent ceasefire, permanent cessation of hostilities. Now, having said that, there's no guarantee that Israel will follow through on it. And yet that still hasn't changed my attitude. And it still has not changed the attitude of all on the ground. They just want to they just want to put a permanent end to the suffering. Think about that. People yelling for no appeasement from their couches. Yeah, exactly. One must ask the question, why? What I think a lot of people fail to consider is that I have been literally completely consistent in my position, both in terms of my analysis over Russia's unjustifiable illegal occupation, annexation, and of course, invasion of Ukraine, as I have been, especially when we consider the severity of the next thing I'm about to mention, Israel's 75-year apartheid, the Nakba, and of course, its current version of the Nakba, which has been the bloodiest version of the permanent ethnic displacement and ethnic cleansing campaign so far. It is always about trying to find peace, no matter the cost. Bro, I haven't seen a single Hammer and Sickle account say that. No, it's always like one person with like 8 fucking followers that Noah, what's the dude's name? That neoliberal guy, he'll like pull it up and be like, Palestinians want peace. Why the fuck do you want to keep the war going or whatever? It's just like Noah Smith. No opinion, exactly. He should have no opinion, honestly. It's irrelevant. It's entirely and utterly irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. I'm just simply saying that although those voices are marginal, they do sometimes exist in an effort to make sure that people understand that, like, I am personally even considering the most marginal of voices in this process. So notice how I am not in favor of Russia and I am in favor of Ukrainian emancipation, despite what my naysayers have spent countless hours trying to convince their followers of. And of course, as you guys also know, I am in favor of Palestinian emancipation. And I don't think my naysayers actually say that I'm not pro-Palestinian. They simply say I'm a terrorist for that position because they are ridiculous charlatans with no moral compass whatsoever that simply channel whatever the fuck the American State Department is saying. They repeat that propaganda as the dogs that they are. I love these guys, people, because they're like, no peace till Tel Aviv burns, long live the resistance, while Hamas are like, actually, maybe this two-state solution thing doesn't sound so bad. Exactly. It's ridiculous. Anyway, my point is, I am completely consistent in this position. I do not change my opinion because I am a dog to the American State Department for free. Just something to consider. Now let's finish off this video.
That Hamas turned down. But all of Israel's proposals so far have been for temporary ceasefires. In other words, they would stop the fighting long enough to allow Israel to get its people out and then decimate Gaza without having to worry about killing any Israeli hostages. This is fundamentally different from the ceasefire that Hamas and the vast majority of the world want, which is a permanent ceasefire that would end the war. Now Israel is trying to say that they have no choice but to invade Rafah because Hamas refuses to negotiate. But this is obviously a lie. If Israel really wanted its hostages back, it could have had them back 7 months ago. This was never about hostages. Israel's been relentlessly carpet bombing the very place their hostages are being held and have killed an untold number of them. Israel was actually very clear from day one what this genocidal slaughter was all about.
Decimate Gaza. Whoa, buddy, slow down there. It's not about eradicating Hamas. It's about eradicating Hamas, not decimating Gaza. Yeah, no, totally. You're so right about that. They just want to eradicate Hamas, except they just keep decimating Gaza instead.
They said they would wipe the Gaza Strip off the face of the earth.
Wait, what?
They said they would bomb it so badly that Gaza would be a place no human being...
Wait, what? Wait, why are these people saying these things? It's about it's about killing Hamas.
Could exist. This was never about hostages. Hostages were always just their excuse to justify the
That guy is being a jokester, for the record. You guys are yelling at a jokester. They're being sarcastic.
extermination of a people and destroy its ability to resist.
As a very radical ML, I hold the same position as you because supporting Ukraine will bring less violence on the workers overall. I think that Russia should have never invaded Ukraine. Controversial, I know. This video is going to have a lot of fucking TOS. That's why I usually don't watch Double Down news videos, even though they're awesome. But they just straight fucking show dead children. Like literally blown to bits and shit. Let's see. David A.
If anyone
Hurst.
is guilty for the bloodshed that's going on, it is the international community, particularly.
What should have Russia done? What should Russia have done? Keep beefing up their fucking trade relations with European states. Apply pressure through OPEC Plus. Never invade Ukraine. Like, that's a pretty good idea, I think. Yeah, have fun. NATO coups your nation and forces itself in there. Yeah, it doesn't matter. As long as there's conflict, as long as they maintain Crimea, which is still technically a part of Ukrainian soil, and as long as there's still conflict in Donbass, ain't no fucking way that Ukraine was ever joining EU. It never was joining EU regardless, okay? It was just not happening. That's why my favorite argument from those who are like kind of Z pushers, like kind of pro-Russia, is the idea that this was actually like 5D chess by Putin to save the citizens of Ukraine that live in eastern Ukraine, which is ironic because infinitely more numbers of people have died, both Russian and Ukrainian, in this Russian invasion so far. I mean, the direct result, yeah, and also on top of that, the neutrality relationship that existed beforehand because of the fear that Russia might invade them, for like Finland and Sweden, for example, but especially Finland, but they're like dual partners with the EU, within the EU structure, and also for NATO, immediately perished because the Russian invasion of Ukraine showed that Russia does not have the capabilities of like permanently invading and annexing Ukraine. So all of a sudden, their fears of being under constant bombardment by Russian forces went away when they realized that Russia could not do this to Ukraine. So, of course, they felt comfortable joining NATO. Now, they had good political reasons to join NATO, as in the population they could convince to join NATO. And also, they did not have any real fear of military escalation from Russia, military retaliation from Russia. So it was a strategic oopsie on that front as well. That is why I regard Vladimir Putin's actions as a beautiful gift to our beautiful NATO generals. Too bad your chat is infested with libs, so you have to glaze Ukraine. That's not true. I have never glazed Ukraine, and I will never glaze Ukraine. I don't think that, I mean, I care about Ukrainian people. I don't think that the Ukrainian government is great. I make fun of Zelensky and have made fun of Zelensky. I've made fun of right-wing nationalism growing in Ukraine. Now I'm a little bit more fearful than just simply making fun of it. The only country I glaze is Japan. And even then, I am still very critical of Japan as well. Huh. How many more baits did this guy have to do? Like, I like that you waited, Weeby. If you cared so much about this topic, why not pay more taxes and donate to these poor countries, brokey? If you cared so much about this topic, why not pay, like, literally got timed out by Fossabot. Still came back for more. You are clearly milking the war conflicts overall. If you cared so much about this topic, don't milk it. You are clearly milking the war conflicts overall. If you cared so much about this topic, don't milk it, dude. People are actually living it. People are actually living it, dude. Yeah, you're right. Except the people that are living in these conflict zones, maybe not Ukrainians. I can't speak for them. I'm not too familiar with their attitude is. I'm sure they would probably still appreciate people talking about Ukraine, especially at this stage as the entire Western world has seemingly forgotten about them. But the people in Palestine absolutely do appreciate Americans talking about the plight of the Palestinians, considering that it seems like no one cares. Damn, bro, you are so swagged out. Look at this fucking fit, my boy. God damn.